before we jump into the recording or the training, I haven't ever been to the Thursday training before. So just as a reminder, my name is Annaleah. I typically do a lot of the onboarding process with everybody. So if you ever have questions about onboarding, if you're still in that process, feel free to reach out to me and I'd love to help with that. And then are there any questions that anybody has that they've thought of in the last week before we actually start?
I'll introduce myself as well really quick. My name is Tyler. I'm one of the co-founders of Upkid. And yeah, I'll try to be joining all of these trainings because one, it's always good to, they're always great trainings. Annaleah is really good at it, so pay attention. And also, it's a great way if you have any questions at all or any concerns, we can bring them up, and it's kind of like an ask me anything, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So awesome.
So I have a question about the onboarding process. So on the app, I've been kind of stuck on the fingerprint section. So I went and I got the document and I got the fingerprint done. And I wasn't sure if it was going to be submitted automatically through them or if it was me who was supposed to, submit it somewhere in the app.
Yeah, great question. And this part is always a little tricky with the fingerprinting. The fingerprinting location should send them for you. As long as you gave them that form and you filled it out, it should get to Child Care Licensing of Utah. And then as soon as we receive word back from Child Care Licensing that you are approved, then we will go in and approve you on the app. And then you can see, and then you should receive an email as well saying that you were approved. So
okay, I just wasn't sure if it was my job to do that, and I was just stuck. So
yeah, that's a great question, and thanks for asking it and being on top of it. So
okay.
Do you have the other parts of the onboarding completed?
I have just the training videos. But the background check is also done. I have my vaccination. I just need to finish the videos.
Okay, because I think I actually got, I'm just trying to look it up really fast. I think I got your background check back today.
Okay.
And I think I sent you an email, but it might not have gone through.
Awesome. So you might be ready to go. So that's perfect.
Yeah. So your background check has come back. I thought I had sent you an email. It's not pulling up in my inbox though, so it might not have sent for some reason. But yeah, once the other steps are completed, then you can go ahead and start picking up shifts.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I also am doing I just got my background check cleared. So I'm just doing the videos right now as well. So.
Perfect. Yeah, once those are done, as long as you have your driver's license already uploaded in the app, then I have put your background check in. So it shouldn't hold you back. Once those videos are done, you should be able to just start going.
Okay, sounds good.
Perfect.
Sorry, I also had the same issue with the fingerprints, but I finished everything else. Will I just get an email or a notification once that's checked off and I can start applying for jobs and stuff?
Yeah. So you should, how long ago did you finish your fingerprints?
I turned in my fingerprints earlier this week on Tuesday.
Okay. Yeah, typically, and if they sent that to Child Care Licensing, we could always try to track it down for you as well. But it typically takes 2 to 3 days. So that's something that we can double check as well to see if it's gone through. But we'll do that probably after the training. And we can check that for you if you want to stay on.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Feel free to reach out if you still have questions. We're going to head into the training now, but if you have questions, you can always put them in the chat. Tyler does a really good job of checking on that throughout the training. And then as we head into the training video or training PowerPoint as well, if you have questions about that specifically too, you can type those out or unmute yourself for a second and ask those questions. As I'm sharing my screen though, today's topic is infant classrooms. Does anybody have experience working in an infant classroom?
I do.
I do.
I do.
Awesome.
I do.
Yeah.
I did it once, and it is the hardest classroom ever. It's so much fun, but yeah. So props to anybody in the infant classroom. That is a lot of diapers to change.
Let me, why is that popping up still? Okay. I had it pulled up last time, but it's not right now. Okay. With the infant classroom, we're going to go over a little bit about just kind of the scheduling, as well as like diaper changes, feedings, different things like that. And as we go, we are trying to incorporate a little bit more questions, so just be prepared for some interaction. So getting started, what kind of to expect in an infant classroom? Most centers have a no shoe rule in their infant rooms, mostly because this prevents any bacteria or things that are on them for these little kids that are always on the ground. So just be prepared. If you're in an infant classroom, they will most likely have you remove your shoes. So if you know beforehand, wearing non-slip with socks or slide-on shoes with socks is a really good option for those. There's also a child to teacher ratio of 4 kids to 1 teacher, with the max being 2 teachers in a classroom. So the most infants you should ever have in one classroom is 8. And then I also expect in an infant classroom to be in the classroom for the full shift. They don't really do outside time majority of the time because of rules that apply with infants not being allowed to be around some of the older kids. So going over scheduling, or in my opinion, the lack thereof in infant classrooms. This age group tends to have a lot of big differences for them all being typically within a year of age. And that stems from them all being at different milestones. You know, they're all under 1 typically, but some of them can walk, some of them are learning to crawl, some can't even sit up yet. So because of that, the only real schedule that you're following is a diapering, feeding, and nap time schedule. With diapering, that's required to happen every 2 hours, while feeding typically needs to happen no later than every 3. But keeping in mind that each infant and toddler needs to follow their own pattern of sleeping and eating. So as a caregiver in this classroom, if you notice that a child is showing signs of needing to eat or sleep, that's typically them saying, my schedule is now, I need a nap now. And that's what you should follow. When it comes to feedings, we'll talk about both bottles and baby food. So with formula, every single bottle that you make needs to be labeled with the child's name, the date and time that you prepared it. And then we need to be making sure that after the feeding, we either discard what's left or we discard the remainder of the formula or breast milk within 2 hours of initiating the feeding. Labeling the bottles with that preparation time really helps so that you're not having to remember when exactly you prepared a bottle. It's just right there for everybody to see. And with preparing bottles, this is both with breast milk and formula. As we prepare it, we need to be making sure that we're testing it before we give it to the infant. The best way to test the temperature of a bottle is to put a little bit of pressure on the nipple of the bottle on the inside of your wrist. That will allow for a little bit of the milk to come out. And if it's too hot for the inside of your wrist, it'll be too hot for the baby's mouth. So you'll need to let it cool down a little bit before you actually feed it to them. When it comes to baby food also needs to be labeled with the child's name, the date and time of preparation. Because within the 24 hours of preparing or opening some baby food, it needs to be discarded as well. When it talks about preparing baby food, this normally is about the oat cereal or the rice cereal that parents will sometimes bring. If it has not yet been mixed with the water, it is not considered prepared. So that has the shelf life of whatever the box says. But as soon as you actually prepare it, that is when you'll need to mark the time and discard that made cereal after the 24 hours. With nap times, important things to remember is that infants need to be laid down to sleep in a designated sleep equipment, such as crib, bassinet, porta potty, or playpen. They're not allowed to stay asleep in non-designated equipment, such as if they fell asleep on the floor or in a bouncer, swing, or car seat. They're okay to fall asleep in those places, but we need to be making sure that we're moving them to a designated sleep area for the rest of their nap. They can't remain in that place. Infants also are not allowed to be placed on their stomachs when you lay them down to sleep, unless otherwise documented from a healthcare provider that that's something that this infant needs. So every time we lay an infant down, it needs to be on their back. If they roll over in their sleep and they're on their stomach, we don't need to keep flipping them onto their back. That's okay. They can be on their stomach, but we are not allowed to place them on their stomachs. The last thing that is important to know is that infants or babies under the age of 1 are not allowed to have blankets in their cribs with them during naps or the binkies with attachments. The attachments can look like these here, or sometimes they have stuffed animals attached to them. Any of those attachments are considered choking hazards, same with blankets. So until they are 1 or older, they're not allowed to have blankets with them. We're also not allowed to put a baby in a crib and then give them a bottle in the crib. If they're able to hold their own bottle, you can lay them on the floor and they can feed themselves, but we can't have those bottles in the cribs at these daycares. Before we jump into the diapering, does anybody have questions about feedings or nap times?
So I remember back in where at this other daycare I was in, we wouldn't give them blankets, but we would have like their sleep sacks. I was just wondering if that was okay.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. So sleep sacks or sometimes they also have swaddles. Those are totally fine to have them placed in. Mostly the rule applies to anything that's not like a sleep sack is placed directly on them and it won't have the chance of like wrapping around their neck or their head.
Okay.
Because it's basically a piece of clothing on them.
Yeah.
Your blankets and your binkies, those can all fall out of their mouth or be wrapped around their neck. So that is why they're considered choking hazards.
Okay.
But that is a good clarifying question. Thank you for that. Any other questions before we jump into this? Okay. With diapering, Tyler brought up a good point yesterday. A lot of these procedures, they're followed at majority of the daycares, but daycares also, this isn't actual licensing law, it's just the recommended diapering procedure. So as we go into different daycares, they might have different processes that they specifically follow. A good example of this that he brought up is A to Z. Unless they can see that you like know how to really change a diaper or you bring it up, they typically won't have you change the diapers because they go through special training processes in their daycares for all of their teachers. So this is your typical outline. This is what CDC recommends. But just keep in mind that some of these steps aren't in all of the daycares. But typically what happens is a child in an infant classroom, they need to be checked at least every 2 hours. This means that you're physically either checking in their diaper or you're feeling their diaper to see if it's wet or if they've had a bowel movement at least every 2 hours. If you notice that a child has a soiled diaper before those 2 hours, we do need to be changing them as we notice that they're soiled because we don't want them sitting because that can cause diaper rashes. But when you notice that a child needs to be changed, the first steps that they typically have you do before you even put the child on the changing pad is prepare the station. So that means that you're washing your hands, grabbing out their diapers and their wipes, as well as putting gloves on. After you have done those things, that is when you will typically go get the child, place them on the mat, and then start the diaper changing process. First, you will unfasten the diaper and make sure that it is placed away from soiling their clothes or anything, making sure it's not right there next to them. And then as we're wiping the child, we need to remember that we wipe front to back. This prevents the introduction of germs to the more front areas, which can cause urinary tract infections. It can also cause yeast infections. So wiping front to back, as long as we remember that, we should be good. After you have cleaned the child, you typically at that point will remove all trash from the area. This includes the gloves that you're wearing. If you want to put gloves on for the whole process, you will need to remove the gloves after you clean the child and then put another pair of gloves on. Again, we want to be making sure that we're not introducing any diaper changing germs back to the area. So after you've removed the trash, that is when you will replace the diaper. If the child needs diaper cream applied, that will need to be done either with the tissue or a freshly gloved finger. That can't be done without something there. You can't do it with just your bare finger. And then after you have put the diaper back on and redressed the child, you will then wash the child's hands. And then return them to a supervised play area. The next step, before you wash your hands, you will clean up the diaper changing area. All of the daycares keep their cleaning products in separate areas. So this is something that you should be asking as you go in is, when I'm changing diapers, where are the products to clean the surface? The cleanup process needs to happen after every single diaper change. Even if you're changing 2 or 3 kids all in a row, you always need to disinfect and sanitize the diaper changing pad before you introduce a new child to that area. And then you also need to make sure after you have sanitized that you are washing your hands as well. This does a lot in preventing of spreading diseases and illnesses, both for you and to the other children. Any questions with the diapering process?
I know that some stations have like those seat belts. Do we put those on at all?
I have not ever been in a place that has required you to put the seatbelts over the child. The biggest thing that we're making sure, one of the reasons you do the preparing of the station before the child is put on the mat is because you're not supposed to leave them unattended. So unless the daycare specifically makes mention of the fact that you need to fasten them, I don't think that that's something that you need to do.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay. We will jump into the last 2 sections really fast. So with documenting, this goes a lot to help with making sure that the kids are changed every 2 hours. They're being fed when they need to, as well as nap times. Different daycares will do this in different ways. I, majority of the time, have seen them do it on paper, but I've noticed that more and more daycares are now moving to an online system where they have an iPad. Whether it's done on paper or on iPad, you need to mark down their feedings, their diaperings, and the nap times. With diaperings, you also need to mark whether they had a bowel movement, if they were wet, if they were both, or if they were dry. When it comes to kids being dry, you check them every 2 hours. If they are dry at the 2-hour mark, you'll need to then check them an hour later, because most kids will have had some sort of either have gone bowel movement or have peed in a 3-hour time period. Documenting, this is one of the examples of how a paper documentation would look like. Again, the diaper type, the time that you changed them, the time that you fed them, if it was a bottle. When it comes to marking how much they ate, you mark how much they ate, not how much you prepared. So if you prepared a small they only drank 4 ounces, you will mark that they drank the 4 ounces, not the 6 ounces that you made. Same with meals. You'll write down the time they ate, what they ate, the amount, and then sleep, their naps, you need to mark when they fell asleep and then when they woke up. Some places, if they do have it on an iPad, they also have a whiteboard so that you know visibly there's something that you can see instead of always having to check the iPad of when you had last changed so-and-so. So just making sure that you know how they're doing documenting so that you can do that for them. The last thing we'll discuss is playtime. Mostly with this, playtime should be engaging and interactive with the babies, even though they don't really play with each other or with you. The biggest reason, this bottom part here says that infants and toddlers should receive interaction with the caregiver at least once every 20 minutes. That mostly for infants just solidifies in their mind that there is somebody there. So if they have a need, they are safe and they will be taken care of. This can be as easy as simply saying a child's name, having them sit on your lap, playing peekaboo, anything like that is a positive interaction that will reinforce to these kids that they are being cared for, and that there is somebody there who, if they have a problem, they will have that need met. The other things here listed, this one mostly just talks about the fact that infants and toddlers aren't allowed to be outside in outdoor play areas where there's older kids. So this is why typically you'll mostly be in a classroom. Some daycares will have a designated infant play area, but most recognize that with them all being on different schedules, having all the babies awake at one time normally doesn't happen. So being able to go outside is very rare.
I have a question real quick,
Yeah.
Annaleah. What have you guys done in the past with playtime with infants, or what ideas do you have of interacting with infants and making it the best experience for them?
Something that I've been researching a lot is attunement and what it means to be attuned to a child's emotional state. And a big concept that I thought was really interesting was rhythm, and introducing rhythms to children where you can be on the same page. So that's look like sometimes like kids will like reach out and tap the ground, and just like tapping along with them and getting on that same rhythm. If there's music playing, kind of like gently tapping their arm along with it. And in studies that have followed infants and rhythmic attunement, it's just made a world of difference in terms of co-regulation later in life. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Somebody yesterday's training talked about putting just a tiny bit of water on the table and letting the infants like kind of splash with it, and just how much they enjoyed that. I thought the idea was fun too. Any other ideas?
Yeah, just kind of with that, singing little songs with them and like moving them with them a little bit to kind of help with cognitive development, and like giving them a choice that they can grab onto and stuff.
Awesome.
I feel like they would love bubbles,
Bubbles.
balloons.
Yep.
A couple of our kids at my last daycare always loved bubbles whenever we would get them out, and it was their favorite. We also tried pudding, giving them pudding one time to play with, and they had a blast. So just kind of doing like tactical things that they can touch and play with. We also tried to have things hanging from the ceiling or things on the wall that they could look at, and we would oftentimes point them out to them and kind of
help them recognize, like, we had a bunch of animals. So we had like dogs and tigers and flowers and different things like that. Just having a whole bunch of different things that they can see and that they can touch is really good for their development.
Awesome. And Madeline just wrote in the chat and said, when me and my mom worked in the daycare at my church, we always had the mantra, babies love bubbles and bananas.
They do.
It's very true.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for all the responses, everybody.
The last thing I'll bring up with this before we jump into just questions again is one of the most important rules that we actually remember in these infant classrooms is that infants and toddlers are not allowed to be confined for more than 30 minutes in one piece of equipment. A lot of your infant classrooms will have bouncers or swings or just the different, some will have playpens and things like that. They are more than welcome to be placed in there. Some of these babies love those, like the swing is their favorite thing ever. But we want to make sure that they're not in there for more than 15 to 30 minutes because the playing on the ground time is good too. That will help strengthen their muscles. It will encourage sitting up if they're not yet sitting up, learning how to crawl. All of these milestones that are important for these infants to be learning, those can't happen when they're confined to one place for the whole day. So they've put the 30-minute time limit on there. But again, it sounds like all of you guys love being super interactive with them, so I'm not concerned about that with you guys. But that is mostly the important things to know when it comes to infants. And this also applies to the toddler room. I say infants, but any child under the age of 2, all of these rules apply for. So we need to like the documenting and everything like that. But last question for you guys, and then we'll open up. What have been some of your, like, if you've been to different daycares, worked in infant classrooms in multiple different daycares, what have been some of the differences that you've seen as you've been in different classrooms?
I would say the amount of structure. My first shift ever with Upkid was an infant classroom, and it was just 2 infants and me by myself and no schedule posted. And so that was kind of an adventure, just like coming up with activities to fill the time and to make sure that the kids are staying engaged. But some of the other infant classrooms I've worked in have set schedules of playtime and music time and when we're going to use different toys. So I guess I would just say be prepared if there isn't a specific schedule and have a couple ideas in mind of how to fill time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do
Great
think,
tip.
yeah, it's like I do think with the infant rooms, sometimes it can be hard to know what to do because sometimes all the infants in the classroom can't move, so they're just laying there the whole time too. So it's like doing a lot of the songs and the peekaboo are all good things to have kind of in your back burner.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining. I know we went a little bit over, but yeah, this was a great training. Feel free to stick around if you have any questions that you want answered. I'm happy to stick around and answer them. And Abigail, by the way, I just saw that your background check went through. So I'll mark that off and you'll be cleared to start working. So, okay, thanks everybody. Okay, awesome.
Really quick then,
You want
with,
to stop recording?
yes.
Can I